Hello, and welcome to this tutorial on information graphics. In some of your projects for ENC 1101 online, you'll be asked to create an infographic. But you may be asking yourself, what is an infographic? For starters, an infographic is shorthand for information graphic, and essentially, infographics are graphical depictions of data and information. By presenting information in a compact, creative way, infographics can quickly convey complex data sets to audiences, thereby keeping readers informed and engaged. When done well, infographics can help you set the tone in a piece of writing. You've probably come across infographics without realizing it, because the web is ripe with data visualizations, and that's all an infographic is, data visualized. Infographics are not exactly new. In fact, they've been around since the beginning of time, when early man painted a series of grouped hands to represent a count of his or her tribe. Later, artists and writers experimented with visualizing information to help get their point across. Most famously, Florence Nightingale visualized the number of soldiers killed in the Crimean War with her groundbreaking rose diagram. More recently, though, information graphics have entered a kind of renaissance as new technology enables virtually anyone to create infographics quickly and easily. Edward Tufte is one of the most famous information designers and was creating infographics long before they were cool. His website and myriad books on information design are worth checking out if you're seriously interested in data visualization. If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., New York, or London and used the tube or metro, you've seen an infographic. So why is a tube map such a great example of an information graphic? Because it visually represents complex information, dozens and dozens of stops, in a way that's easy to understand even for those who aren't literate. Infographics take all the words and numbers that might show up in an important slide in a presentation, let's say, and creatively organizes them in a way that engages the reader and makes sense almost at first glance. As you might imagine, though, that's easier said than done. Technically speaking, an infographic can be a pie chart, pictograph, line graph, bar chart, or any other kind of chart you probably learned to make in Microsoft Word or Excel in high school business class. But good infographics are more than stock charts, as you can see in this example. Using color, icons, specific fonts, and visual navigation cues are really important in making sure that your reader can understand what they're visually reading. Infographics are designed all over the world, every day, so there's never a lack of websites you can visit to see how information is visually represented in unique ways. Some of my favorite sites include thedailyinfographic.com or coolinfographics.com. But there are literally dozens of sites with infographic examples, and it would be a good idea for you to visit some of these sites and become familiar with what distinguishes good infographics from the merely average. Alright, so now that you know what they are, what they're supposed to do for you, let's review a few tips for creating your first infographic, and then I'm going to walk you through a free online infographic creation tool so you can start building your own. The first rule of thumb when creating an infographic is to keep it simple. That sounds obvious, right? But some new visualizers forget that the whole idea behind an infographic is to reduce the work a reader has to do to comprehend a concept or idea. Don't try to make one picture or icon do too much work. Okay, tip 1. Make sure that you're working with clean data. To create a stunning infographic, you need interesting data that's also clear. And this takes research and planning. When I set out to design an infographic, the first thing I do is collect the facts and statistics I think I want to use, and then I doodle. I literally draw out several iterations of my data on a piece of paper and start to look for connections. I ask myself, which kind of visualization will best represent my data set? Is it a pie chart? A timeline? If I'm comparing the largest bankruptcies in history, then a bar chart might be a good way to quickly represent this information. The modern twist would be to make the bars sinking ships. See how I use this lovely visual metaphor to make the graphic more interesting? Beyond making it interesting, it's easier to use ships at varying moments of sinking than to line up the figures and names on an X and Y axis. That information should be available to readers, but it's not central to your graphic. Remember, you don't want to make your readers do too much work. Tip 2. Consider your infographic a visual essay. Though your infographic is an amendment to your actual essay, consider the graphic itself an essay. It has to tell an interesting story. There has to be a beginning, a middle, an end, and you need to cite where you're getting your data from. The data you pick to visualize shouldn't just be any data you come across in your research. It should be the data that helps you argue your thesis or main points, chart a conversation over time, or draw conclusions. Tip 3. Decide on a color scheme and visual style and stick with it. While some wild color combinations can add visual interest and extend a point, using too many colors in a scheme can be visually distracting. The same is true of visual styles. If you start off using mostly photos in your infographic, don't suddenly switch to illustrations. Following are a few examples of various ways to visualize your data. For Project 1, an example, when you're asked to track a conversation over time, you might find a timeline most helpful. Instead of plotting dates, as you might normally see in a timeline, you could plot rhetorical arguments, or the most common ways people talked about your subject, or key people representing your topic. Flowcharts, annotated maps, Venn diagrams, size comparisons, and showing objects of similar size or value are also ways that you can start to visualize key information. Before you ever put pixel to paper, as it were, you need to think about what you're visualizing and the best way to visualize it. Now, if you have some graphic design experience, the easiest way to create an infographic is to use vector graphic software and design the elements independently. You'll have more freedom to be creative, and you'll maintain creative control. If you'd like to learn more about Adobe Illustrator, a common tool used to create infographics, you can check out a great tutorial on it on Atomic Learning, which is found inside Blackboard or by logging into Atomic Learning's website using your USF-Net ID. I'm assuming you don't have an illustration tool and you don't have much experience creating infographics. In that case, we're going to use one of the many free tools on the web to create our custom infographic. For our demonstration, we're going to use Easel.ly, as it's the easiest to use, it's free, and it does everything we need it to do. Once you're on the easily.ly website, you'll need to register for an account. Without registering, you can't save, and thus you can't share your visualizations, so it's an important first step. Once you're logged in, you'll see a blank white canvas that's called, appropriately enough, the canvas. The first time you log in, there's this handy group of visual instructions that guide you through the various parts of your canvas, but we're going to go through this site in detail together. In the top left corner of the menu bar, you'll see something called themes, objects, backgrounds, shapes, text, and an upload button. The zoom tools, grid, and undo tools are fairly self-explanatory, so we'll leave these alone for now. A theme is a visual theme. This is the backbone of your visualization. When you click the Themes tab, a drop-down scroll bar appears. You can scroll through the pre-designed themes and choose the theme that best represents the kind of data you want to visualize. This is when it becomes really important to know in advance what you're visualizing, so that you already have some idea of the best way to visualize it. An example, if you're comparing percentages of animal testing labs across the country, then the second template would be a great starting place for you. In fact, let's use that one. To use this theme, simply drag it to your canvas. Pretty sweet, huh? As you can probably tell, each of the elements on the canvas is editable. So if I selected the 10% circle in the northwest region of the country, I could edit that text field to represent whatever number needs to go there. Let's say animal testing is really high in the northwest, so we're going to set that number at 15%. Every element on this page is editable, so I can drag that little man in the upper left-hand corner to any part of the page. I can resize him, I can change his color, and I can select a series of illustrations and move them as a group. Now each of the elements on the canvas acts like its own layer, meaning you can move each element in front of or behind other elements on the page. At the top, you can see that you can change an element's position, moving it forward or back by clicking the forward or back icons. Also, if you hover your mouse over the various tools, a tooltip conveniently appears reminding you what each tool is used for. Next to position, you see that you can change an element's opacity. Back at the top, next to themes, you see a button called Objects. Click this button and another drop-down menu appears with a series of illustrations that, like the themes, are draggable. Simply drag and drop the icons onto your canvas and play with their features as you like. Since I'm measuring animal testing labs, it would be nice to find an icon that represented animals. I have two options at this point. I can scroll through the various sections of icons and, look at that, I see an animal icon tab. Voila, animals. Or I could import from my computer any image, illustration, or photograph I wish to use. For now, I'm just going to use the preloaded animal icons. So I'll select the animal icon I wish to use, a bunny, and drag it to my canvas. Now this provides a good opportunity to think about how I want to represent my data. Let's say that the numbers on this map accurately reflected my data. In that case, the Southwest has the most animal testing labs in the country. So I could tell my reader numerically, or I could show my reader by making the bunny bigger than other bunnies on the page. This is the beauty of information design. It helps readers read your visualization quickly without necessarily reading all the facts, details, and percentages. Visualizations are like the gist of the story. Now back to the top menu. You see here that you can add shapes and text. You may want to explain your numbers or add citations, and using the text feature is the way to do that. Over to the right, you see the grid tool we skipped over before. If you click it, a grid appears on your canvas. Without going into too much detail, most visual designers lay out their designs based on a grid system. Our brains like to simplify things to make them easier to understand. This is why we try to impose order on things that seem chaotic. It's also why we see faces in the moon. The easier it is to impose order, the quicker our brains identify a pattern and move on to the next challenge. Grids help us visually order and organize elements on a page so that our brains can make sense of what they're seeing and then move on. If you want to better understand grid theory, there are multiple resources available online. Just search for Grid Theory of Graphic Design to get started. For our purposes though, you can use the grid or keep it turned off. Okay, let's say that we love our infographic and we're ready to share it with the world. First, you have to save your infographic before you can share it. The Save button is at the top left-hand corner. So we'll give our information graphic a title and hit Save. Now select the Home tab to the right of Save, and this will take you back out to your home page. Here you can see I've played around and created 2 infographics. Underneath the Poor Bunny graphic, I have 2 options, View and Share. View does what it says it does. It lets you view your infographic. Share lets you share it in a few ways. For our purposes, you want to download your infographic and save it to your desktop or hard drive so you can insert it into your essay later. You see underneath Download, you can view it in a browser or you can copy and paste the embed code, adding it to a web page. You also have the option of making your visualization public or private, a really nice feature that isn't enabled in some other visualization editors. And of course, if you decide you want to check your visualization, you can click the trash can delete button at the bottom right-hand corner. Right now, Easel.ly is a beta version. Of course, you can always get at visualizing information in many different ways, using this program or tools inside Microsoft Office or an advanced suite of programs like Adobe Creative Suite. Whatever program and workflow you choose to use to visualize your data, remember that good visualizations start with good, clear information and a clear idea of how you want to design that information visually. For that, you don't need fancy tools, just pen and paper and a good dose of creativity. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to create infographics. In the next tutorial, I'll walk you through how to insert your information graphics into various tools like Microsoft Word or Prezi.